What if what if your thoughts could shape reality, like actually influence things around us? That's what we're looking at today, right? With all this stuff on human consciousness.
Yeah.
We've got like excerpts from this book. It's called IEE4.pdf. Hope I'm saying that right. And
close enough.
Okay, cool. And along with that, you gave us this really interesting list of like researchers and theories and even some like real world examples of this consciousness stuff. It's wild.
Yeah, you're right. It's a deep dive for sure.
Sure.
So IEE4.pdf translates to who we are.
Yeah.
And it seems to be about like some ancient wisdom, you know, about what humans can really do.
Okay, cool. So let's break this down. One of the first things that caught my eye in who we are was this idea of prana. It's like this life force, right? This energy flowing through everything that's alive. What's really interesting is that the book says we can actually like influence this prana by doing things like pranayama, which is all about controlling your breath.
It's pretty amazing how these old traditions connect the body and breath with this like subtle energy system. And the book goes even further. It connects prana with the Kundalini, which is often shown as this coiled up serpent of energy right at the base of the spine.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the Kundalini is a powerful concept. It pops up in a bunch of different spiritual traditions, and it's usually associated with higher states of consciousness.
So it's like our bodies are more than just flesh and bone. We've got this whole energy system, and by working with our breath, we can maybe tap into that and maybe even change our consciousness.
That's the idea. And who we are suggests that humans might exist in multiple dimensions too. It talks about space-time transcendence, which hints that maybe we can move past our normal ideas of time and space.
Whoa, that brings up so many questions. Does that mean we could like access information or experiences beyond how we understand time? The book also uses the word hyperspace. Is that just another way to describe these realms beyond our normal three-dimensional world?
It definitely seems like the book's pointing to something beyond what we normally see, but it's careful not to give like really simple answers about how these dimensions actually work.
Right.
So maybe not time travel the way we usually think about it, but still like totally mind-blowing. And what's really interesting is that this whole multidimensionality thing isn't just in this one book. There's actually a bunch of research on the human energy field.
Yeah.
Some call it the biofield or even bioplasma.
Yeah, for sure. There are a bunch of researchers in your sources who have spent their whole careers studying this biofield. They say that it interacts with the Earth's electromagnetic field. And maybe even with cosmic energies. It's not just some bubble around us. It's like this dynamic field that links us to a bigger web of energy.
So we're talking about like invisible fields of energy all around us, connecting us to everything else.
Welcome.
What's really cool is that two of these researchers, you gave me a Valerie Hunt and Rosalind Briere, they used Rolfing and other bodywork stuff to look into these energies. Yeah. And they actually saw measurable changes in the biofield.
Wow.
Right? That correlated with like different emotional and mental states.
That's amazing, isn't it? It's like our inner world is showing up in this field.
And it makes you wonder, could it work the other way too? Could these outside energies be messing with our thoughts and emotions, even our physical health, in ways we don't even get?
That's a huge thought. It's like we're always swimming in this sea of energy, both from inside us and from the world around. And this energy is talking to us somehow. We're not just separate people. We're all connected to everything.
Exactly. Another researcher you mentioned, Hiroshi Motoyama, he took it even further. He linked acupuncture meridians, you know, those energy pathways in Chinese medicine, to this human energy field and to consciousness itself.
Wow.
He even made tools to measure these subtle energies. So he brought like a scientific side to what people used to think was just like spiritual stuff.
Wait, so there are actual scientific tools that can measure this energy? That's insane. This makes me think that all this talk about energy and spiritual traditions, maybe it's not just a metaphor. Maybe it's actually real.
It's definitely something to think about.
Right.
But we're just getting started. Your sources also introduced this guy, Gustav Naessens. He found something called the somatid while he was exploring the microscopic world.
Oh, yeah. The somatid is supposed to be this tiny building block of life.
Yeah.
And it can like transform into different forms. What's crazy is that Naessens said the somatid is in all living things. And it might even have its own kind of intelligence.
Naessens saw the somatid changing into all sorts of cell types.
Yeah.
So maybe there's a link between consciousness and how our bodies are actually built. It's a really radical idea. It challenges how we think about life itself.
Yeah.
Could this be the missing piece between consciousness and like physical stuff?
That question leads us right into the next thing we need to talk about, the connection between our glands, our endocrine system, and consciousness. Your sources even mention this book called Astrology in the Ductal Glands. I'm guessing it's not talking about horoscopes, right?
Oh, no. It's talking about the glands in the endocrine system, like the
Yeah.
pineal gland,
Yeah.
the pituitary gland, the thyroid, they make hormones that control so much of what our bodies do. But this book looks at this wild idea that they're also linked to our consciousness, like they're bridges between the physical world and the more subtle stuff.
It's interesting to think about how our hormones and emotions and consciousness are all mixed up together. But there's a lot to unpack there. Maybe we could start by looking at the work of Charles R. Stokard. He researched how emotions affect our glands.
Yeah, definitely Stokard found a clear connection between how we feel and what's happening in our bodies. For example, he saw that when we feel fear or anger, the adrenal glands release adrenaline, which, gets your heart racing and gets you ready to fight or run.
Right, that's like basic biology. But how does that connect to consciousness? Are you saying it's a two-way street?
That's exactly what Stokard's research says. It's not just that our emotions affect our bodies, but changes in our physical state, like our hormone levels, can also affect our mood and even how we think. It's like this feedback loop that makes the relationship between our minds and bodies even more complex.
This is so fascinating. Like our inner world and our physical body are always in this conversation with each other. But there's more to this energy conversation, right? Something about brain waves and cosmic connections.
You got it. We're going to get into how our brain waves, the Earth's geomagnetic field, and even cosmic influences all play together next. But first, I think we need a minute to let all this sink in.
Yeah, good idea. That's a lot to process.
It is.
Whoa, okay.
Take a breath.
Yeah.
We'll be back in a sec.
Okay, yeah. I think I'm back with you. So we were talking about this connection between our emotions and our glands and even like our brain waves. You mentioned cosmic influences too. That's where it gets really out there, right?
Yeah, it does. Your sources go into how our brainwave activity might be linked to the Earth's magnetic field.
Yeah.
And even influenced by like cosmic stuff. They talk about this thing called the Schumann resonance.
Okay, right. The Schumann resonance. That rings a bell. It's something about the Earth's energy field, right?
Exactly. The Schumann resonance is a bunch of frequencies that come from lightning all over the planet.
Right.
It's like this constant hum of electromagnetic energy in the Earth's atmosphere.
Okay. And how does that affect our brains?
Well, our brains also produce electrical activity, right, which we can measure as brainwaves. And these brainwaves have different frequencies that match up with different states of consciousness. What's interesting is that the Schumann resonance happens to be in the same frequency range as some of our brainwaves.
So you're saying our brainwaves could like resonate with this global electromagnetic thing?
That's what some researchers think. They say that the Schumann resonance might subtly affect our mood, our sleep patterns, even our thinking.
Wow, that's wild. It really makes you realize how connected we are to the Earth and maybe even to the cosmos. Like we're all part of this huge energy symphony. But your sources go even further, right? They talk about using technology to change our brainwaves on purpose.
Yeah, they mention brainwave entrainment, which uses specific frequencies of sound or light to change brainwave patterns. It can be used to like enhance certain states of consciousness, like focus or relaxation.
So it's like a tech shortcut to altered states of consciousness. There are those binaural beats I've heard about, where you listen to slightly different tones in each ear, and it's supposed to shift your brain waves. But there are more advanced devices too, right?
There are. But as we explore these technologies, it's really important to think about the ethics of it all. We need to ask questions about long-term effects and using it responsibly.
Totally. Just because we can mess with our brainwaves doesn't mean we should.
Yeah.
It's like opening Pandora's box. We got to be careful.
I agree. Now, changing gears a bit, your sources also give a lot of information on mystical experiences, which are often described as like huge shifts in consciousness that lead to feelings of unity, transcendence, and deep insight. What stuck out to you in that section?
That's the part that really got me curious. You know, mystical experiences, altered states, glimpses of something beyond the ordinary. It's like our consciousness is breaking open and showing us a whole new reality. What I found super interesting was how these experiences can just happen randomly through practices like meditation or even by using certain psychedelics. It seems like there are lots of ways to get to these altered states.
There are. And while science is still trying to figure out exactly how these experiences work, there's more and more evidence that they can lead to real insights and personal growth. Your sources point out the potential for increased self-awareness, a deeper connection to something bigger than yourself, and even a sense of purpose and meaning in life.
It's like these experiences shake us out of our routines and show us that there's so much more to life than what we see and touch. They point to a deeper reality that's usually hidden.
One of your sources mentions Emanuel Swedenborg. He had really intense mystical visions later in life, and they totally changed his whole view of the world. He claimed to have visited heaven and hell, and his writings have inspired a lot of thinkers and spiritual people. What's interesting for our conversation is the connection Swedenborg made between his inner experiences and a bigger spiritual reality.
It's like these mystical experiences aren't just happening in our heads. They're showing us something real about how existence works, connecting us to a dimension beyond the physical.
Exactly. And your sources bring us back to the present day with the work of Ronald Wang-Ju. He spent his career trying to understand the connection between altered states of consciousness and the human energy field. You know that biofield we were talking about earlier?
Oh, right. Back to the biofield. It seems to keep coming up in this exploration of consciousness. I'm starting to think of it as a bridge between our inner world and what's happening around us.
I like that. That's a good way to put it. Ju believed that the biofield isn't just a side effect of our bodies, but an important part of who we are. He saw that during meditation, the biofield actually expanded and became more organized, like it was in a heightened state of energy and information exchange.
That makes me wonder, if meditation can change our biofield, what else could be possible?
No, that's a great question. And it leads us to maybe the most profound mystery in your sources. The relationship between consciousness, will, and matter. This idea that our thoughts and intentions can actually affect the physical world.
Yeah, that's the big one, right? The mind over matter thing. Are we talking about telekinesis and stuff like that?
Your sources talk about people who seem to break the laws of physics, like healers who use energy to help people heal, or people who say they've experienced psychokinesis. Now, while the scientific evidence for these things is still being debated, there are tons of stories, and even some lab studies that suggest there might be something to it.
It's like we're looking into a world where the rules of reality are still being written. But if we think about the possibility of mind over matter, how does it even work?
That's the million-dollar question, and one that science is still working on. Some researchers think that quantum mechanics, which looks at the super tiny world of atoms and stuff, might hold the answer.
Quantum mechanics, that's where particles can be in multiple states at the same time, right? How does that relate to our thoughts affecting the physical world?
Well, in quantum mechanics, they say that just observing something can change the state of a particle. So consciousness plays a part in how reality shows up at the subatomic level. Some physicists think that this principle might work in the bigger world too, meaning that our conscious awareness could actually affect how matter behaves.
Okay, my mind is blown. It's like our consciousness isn't just watching, it's actually helping to create reality. But how do we know any of this is true? There's a lot of speculation and stories. But is there like hard scientific proof that our minds can directly influence stuff?
That's a good point. While there's more and more research looking into these ideas, a lot of it is still considered fringe science. Studying consciousness is tough because it's hard to separate and measure subjective experiences. And the idea of mind over matter goes against a lot of our current scientific understanding.
So right now, it's more of a leap of faith than a proven fact. But it definitely opens up a lot of possibilities. Maybe we're about to see a whole new scientific revolution. One that recognizes the power of consciousness and its role in shaping reality.
It's an exciting thought. And even if we don't have all the proof yet, just thinking about these ideas can expand our awareness and make us question the limits we put on ourselves and on what reality even is.
This has been an amazing journey, and I feel like we're just getting started. It's both thrilling and a little overwhelming to consider all the possibilities.
I know what you mean. We've covered so much. Maybe now is a good time to just take a breath and think about everything we've learned so far, before we move on to our final thoughts.
Yeah, that sounds good. Let's do that. Man, I'm still like wrapping my head around everything we talked about. It's crazy. From ancient stuff to like the newest research, it seems like exploring consciousness never ends.
It really doesn't.
Yeah.
And I think one of the biggest takeaways is that how we understand consciousness is changing fast. We're moving past this idea that the world is just material stuff.
Right.
We're starting to see that there's so much more to reality than what we can see.
It's like we're waking up to this whole new universe where consciousness isn't just something the brain makes, but like a real force that shapes reality and interacts with it.
Exactly. And if that's true, it makes you wonder, what does that mean for how we live our lives?
That's a big one. If our consciousness is really multidimensional, and if it can actually shape reality, how does that change how we see things? Does it mean we need to be more responsible for our thoughts and feelings and beliefs?
It definitely seems like our inner world is more powerful than we thought. If our thoughts and emotions are showing up in our energy field, and maybe even affecting the world around us, then we got to be more aware and intentional about how we're being.
So we're not just stuck with whatever happens. We actually help create our own reality. Yeah, that's pretty amazing, but kind of scary too.
Yeah, it is. And it shows how important it is to do things that help us connect with our inner selves and the energy around us. Like meditation, mindfulness, or even just spending time in nature.
It's like we need to upgrade how we think. Go from being on autopilot to being really aware so we can handle this bigger reality with more skill.
Yeah. And if we open up to this bigger view of consciousness, it opens up so many possibilities. It lets us explore our full potential, heal from old stuff, and connect with something bigger than ourselves.
This whole deep dive has given me so much to think about. It's like you open a door to a whole new way of seeing the world and myself.
And the coolest part is that this is just the start. There's still so much out there to discover.
So as we wrap this up, what's the one thing you hope our listener takes away from all this talk about consciousness?
If I had to pick one thing, I'd say pay attention to what's going on inside you. Notice your thoughts, your feelings, how your energy feels. Be aware of how you interact with everything around you. And while you're doing that, ask yourself, what if my consciousness is way more powerful than I thought? What if I can actually shape my reality in ways I'm just starting to get?
That's a really powerful idea, and I hope it inspires our listener to keep exploring this stuff long after we're done.
Me too. This journey of exploring consciousness, it's a lifelong thing. And it's best to do it with an open mind, a curious heart, and a willingness to go beyond what we think we know.
Well, thank you so much for taking us on this incredible deep dive. I have a feeling I'll be thinking about this conversation for a while.
It was my pleasure. And remember, the exploration doesn't stop here. Keep asking questions, keep discovering, and keep diving deep into the mysteries of consciousness. You never know what you might find.
That's such good advice. Thanks again for joining us, and thanks to everyone listening. We'll see you next time for another deep dive into the unknown.